I was 7 when my father vanished. Not the dramatic kind of vanishing you see in movies, with ransom notes or signs of struggle. He just disappeared. One ordinary Tuesday morning, his truck was found abandoned on the side of Highway 16, keys still in the ignition. His wallet sitting on the passenger seat. That's all we got, an empty truck and a lifetime of questions. My name is Harper, and that morning changed everything. I remember standing in our small living room, clutching my teddy bear while 2 police officers spoke to my mother in hushed tones. Mom's face remained composed, but her hands kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd never seen before. Mrs. Quinn will keep investigating, but right now there's no evidence of foul play, one officer said, his notepad already halfway into his pocket. The other one kept glancing at me with that awful mix of pity and discomfort adults get around children in crisis. Mom nodded mechanically, thanking them as they left. The moment the door closed, she slid down against it, silent tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat next to her and held her hand. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. The next few weeks were a blur of whispered phone calls and concerned neighbors bringing casseroles we barely touched. Mom threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts at the diner and starting a cleaning job on weekends. I learned to pack my own lunch and set my alarm clock. "Your mother's so strong," people would say, their voices dripping with sympathy. But I saw how she'd pause sometimes, staring at Dad's coffee mug still hanging on its hook in the kitchen. Or how she'd wake up in the middle of the night to check his side of the closet, as if his clothes might have mysteriously reappeared. One evening, about 3 months after he disappeared, I found Mom in the garage, sitting in Dad's old workshop. She was holding his favorite wrench, running her fingers over the worn handle. "Harper, sweetie," she said, noticing me hovering in the doorway. "Come here." She patted the workbench beside her, and I climbed up. "You know your daddy loved us very much, right?" I nodded, even though I wasn't so sure anymore. If he loved us, why didn't he come back? "Sometimes." Mom paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people leave, and we might never know why. But that doesn't mean it's our fault. You understand." I didn't, not really, but I nodded again because it seemed like what she needed. "We're going to be okay," she said more to herself than to me. "We've got each other, and that's what matters." That night, I overheard her on the phone with Aunt Sarah. "The bank called again," Mom whispered. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up with the mortgage. And these medical bills from his last checkup." I had no idea he'd canceled his life insurance. I lay in bed, clutching my teddy bear tighter, trying to make sense of it all. Dad had always seemed so happy, so present. He'd swing me around in the backyard, calling me his little monkey. He'd spend hours teaching me about tools in his workshop, letting me hold the flashlight while he fixed things. How could someone just walk away from their life without a trace? Years later, I'd learned that the police found something else in his truck that day, something they didn't tell us about initially. A receipt from a gas station in Oregon, dated 2 days after he disappeared. He hadn't vanished into thin air after all. He'd chosen to leave. But that morning, watching those police officers walk away, I was just a confused 7-year-old girl, unaware that this was only the beginning of a pattern that would shape my entire life. People leaving, secrets unraveling, and the constant struggle to keep myself from falling apart in the aftermath. 11 years passed in a blur of late-night study sessions, part-time jobs, and my mother's unwavering determination to give me a normal life. But nothing prepares you for hearing the word cancer in a sterile doctor's office. Watching your mother's face as she processes the news with the same quiet strength she showed the day Dad left. I was 18, fresh out of high school and ready to start college on a scholarship when Mom's persistent cough turned into something more sinister. Stage 3 lung cancer. She'd never even smoked. "It's just another bump in the road, honey," Mom said, squeezing my hand as we left the hospital. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've handled worse. But this was different." The medical bills started piling up faster than the autumn leaves in our yard. I'd come home from my evening shift at the campus coffee shop to find Mom hunched over spreadsheets at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible numbers work. "You should defer college for a year," she suggested one evening, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. The chemotherapy had taken her hair, but not her spirit. "Focus on work, save some money." I shook my head, already knowing where this conversation was heading. Not happening. I can handle both. Harper. Mom, please. I pulled out the chair next to her, sitting down. You've spent the last 11 years making sure I had every opportunity possible. Don't ask me to give up now. She started crying then, silent tears rolling down her hollow cheeks. I'm supposed to take care of you, not the other way around. I grabbed her hand, noticing how thin her fingers had become. We take care of each other. That's what we do. The next few months became a brutal routine. Classes in the morning, hospital visits in the afternoon, work in the evening, and studying late into the night. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine coffee. My scholarship covered tuition, but everything else, the medical bills, the mortgage, the groceries, came down to careful juggling and prayer. Then came the night that changed everything. I was closing up the coffee shop when my phone rang. Mom had collapsed at home. Our elderly neighbor found her when she went to drop off some soup. The hospital corridors seemed endless as I ran toward her room. The doctor's words blurred together. Complications, pneumonia, critical condition. I stood there, watching the machines breathe for her, remembering all the times she'd been strong for me. You should rest, a nurse said gently, touching my arm. She's stable for now. I shook my head. I need to be here when she wakes up. But she didn't wake up. 3 days later, I had to make the decision no 18-year-old should have to make. The doctor explained that her organs were failing, that the cancer had spread more aggressively than they'd thought, that keeping her on life support would only prolong the inevitable. She left this for you, the nurse said, handing me an envelope after it was over. Inside was a letter, written in Mom's careful handwriting. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry I couldn't be stronger for you. But you need to know something. You were never the one who needed to be strong. You were my strength all along. Every time I wanted to give up, every time the weight felt too heavy, I'd look at you and find the courage to keep going. Don't let this break you. Don't let anything break you. You're a Quinn woman, and we bend but never break. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my pocket. The world felt impossibly large and empty, but I could still hear Mom's voice in my head. We bend but never break. That night, sitting alone in our too-quiet house, I made 2 promises to myself. First, I would finish college, no matter what it took. And second, I would never let anyone make me feel as helpless as I felt in that hospital corridor. Little did I know, both these promises would be tested sooner than I expected. I met Ryan in my advanced economics class 6 months after Mom died. He sat next to me on a rainy Tuesday, offered me a coffee, and somehow made me laugh for the first time since the funeral. It wasn't love at first sight, more like recognition. Here was someone else who understood what it meant to navigate life's unexpected turns. You're taking 18 credits and working 2 jobs? He asked one evening as we studied in the library. That's insane, Harper. I shrugged, highlighting another passage in my textbook. Not much choice. The scholarship only covers tuition. There's always a choice. He closed my book, forcing me to look at him. Let me help. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's... He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. It's me caring about someone who's working herself to death. That's when my scholarship renewal letter arrived. Or rather, the rejection letter. I stood in my tiny studio apartment, reading and rereading the words until they blurred together. Without the scholarship, there was no way I could continue. All of Mom's sacrifices, all my promises, they'd amount to nothing. Move in with me, Ryan said when I told him. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment, rain drumming on the roof. My roommate's graduating early. You can take his room, split the rent. It's cheaper than this place. Ryan, just listen, he interrupted. You're brilliant, Harper. You're going to graduate and become some hotshot financial analyst, and I'll get to say I knew you when. But you can't do it if you're sleeping 3 hours a night and living on ramen. I stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Why are you doing this? Because someone should. His voice softened. Because you've been carrying everything alone for so long, you've forgotten you don't have to. 2 weeks later, I moved into Ryan's apartment. It was bigger than mine, closer to campus, and somehow everything started feeling manageable. Ryan cooked while I studied. We split the bills. For the first time since Mom died, I felt like I could breathe. But then came the night that changed everything. I was working late at my campus job when Ryan called, panic in his voice. "Harper, we need you." There's been an accident. I found him in the emergency room, blood on his shirt, looking shell-shocked. "It's my dad," he explained. "Heart attack. Mom's with him now." I stayed with Ryan all night, watching him pace the waiting room, making coffee runs, holding his hand when the doctor finally came out. His father survived, but barely. That's when I met Evelyn Mitchell for the first time. She swept into the waiting room like a hurricane in designer clothes, her mascara perfectly intact despite the circumstances. Her eyes landed on our joined hands, then on my worn jeans and coffee-stained sweater. "You must be Harper," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Ryan's friend." "Girlfriend," Ryan corrected, squeezing my hand. "She's been here all night, Mom." "How sweet." Her tone suggested it was anything but. "Richard's asking for you, darling. Family only right now." I felt Ryan tense beside me. "Harper is family." "Of course she is." Evelyn's smile turned sharp. "But perhaps she should go home and change? We wouldn't want the hospital staff thinking we're..." Well, the implication hung in the air. I stood up, gathering my things, but Ryan caught my arm. "Stay," he whispered. "Please." I looked at him, then at Evelyn, who was watching us with calculated interest. In that moment, I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach turn, a flash of the same controlling nature that had driven my father away, that had made my mother doubt herself for years. "It's okay," I said, squeezing Ryan's hand. "Go be with your dad. I'll come back later." As I walked out of the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just glimpsed my future, a future where every decision, every moment would be scrutinized and judged by Evelyn Mitchell. I should have listened to that instinct. Should have run while I still could. But I was too focused on not losing another person I loved to see the warning signs right in front of me. Ryan proposed on graduation day, right after we received our diplomas. It wasn't a grand gesture, just us sitting on the steps of the economics building where we first met. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen myself. "I know it's not much," he said, looking nervous. "But I promise, Harper, I'll spend my life making sure you never feel alone again." I said yes without hesitation. After 2 years together, Ryan felt like home. Steady, reliable, everything my father wasn't. We planned a small wedding, something we could afford on our entry-level salaries. That's when Evelyn stepped in. "Darling," she said during what was supposed to be a casual dinner at her house, "you simply can't get married at the courthouse. What would everyone think?" Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, we've talked about this. We want something simple." "Simple doesn't mean cheap." She sipped her wine, eyes fixed on me. "Unless, of course, Harper's uncomfortable with accepting help from family." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. "We appreciate the offer, but..." "I insist." Her tone left no room for argument. "Consider it my wedding gift. After all, you're going to be a Mitchell now." Ryan beamed, missing the way his mother's words made me flinch. I wasn't becoming a Mitchell. I was still a Quinn, my mother's daughter. But I stayed quiet, not wanting to spoil his happiness. The wedding spiraled into something unrecognizable. Evelyn took over, booking an expensive venue, ordering custom everything. Each time I tried to object, she'd already paid for something else, making it impossible to back out without seeming ungrateful. The night before the wedding, I found myself alone in the bridal suite, staring at my reflection. The dress was beautiful, and completely not me. Everything about this wedding felt like a performance for Evelyn's social circle. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "You okay? You seemed off at the rehearsal dinner." I started typing "I'm fine" but deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "Remember when we were kids and promised to tell each other the truth, no matter what?" Her response came quickly. "What's really going on, Harper?" Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Evelyn swept in, carrying a small box. "I have something for you," she said, opening it to reveal a pearl necklace. It's been in the Mitchell family for generations. Every bride has worn it. The pearls gleamed in the soft light, beautiful and suffocating. I was planning to wear my mother's locket. Evelyn's smile tightened. "Oh, sweetie, That old thing? This is your chance to start fresh, to become part of a real family. The words hit like a physical blow. I had a real family. Of course you did. Her tone was patronizing. But let's be honest. A father who abandoned you, a mother who couldn't even afford proper health care. Ryan's offering you something better. Don't cling to the past. I stood up, hands shaking. My mother worked herself to death to give me a future. Don't you dare. And now you have one, she interrupted smoothly. Thanks to my son. Just remember that. After she left, I sat on the floor, clutching my mother's locket. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger in her expensive dress and perfect makeup. Mom's words echoed in my head, "Don't let anything break you." My phone buzzed again. "Zoe, whatever you decide, I've got your back." I took a deep breath and made a decision. I couldn't stop this wedding without hurting Ryan, but I could hold on to who I was. Tomorrow, I would walk down the aisle wearing my mother's locket, not Evelyn's pearls. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt like drawing a line in the sand. What I didn't know then was that this moment, this choice between my identity and Evelyn's vision of who I should be, was just the beginning of a war I wasn't prepared to fight. 3 years into our marriage, the cracks started showing. While my career in financial analysis took off, Ryan seemed content working retail at the mall, picking up occasional shifts and spending more time at his mother's house than ours. I got the promotion, I announced over dinner one night, unable to contain my excitement. Senior analyst position, with a significant raise. Ryan pushed his food around his plate. That's great. Great? Ryan, this is huge. We can finally start saving for. Mom thinks we should look at houses in Oakwood Heights, he interrupted, not meeting my eyes. Sit down, my faculties. Oakwood Heights was where Evelyn lived, all massive houses and manicured lawns. We can't afford Oakwood Heights. With your new salary, even with the raise, those houses are way beyond our means. I tried keeping my voice level. Besides, our apartment is fine. Fine isn't good enough anymore. He finally looked up. Mom says people are starting to talk. People? You mean your mother's country club friends. The words came out sharper than intended. Since when do we care what they think? Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Evelyn, right on cue. I watched him answer, watched his posture change as he spoke to her. When had my confident, supportive husband become this person who couldn't make a decision without his mother's input? The next day, I came home to find Ryan and Evelyn in our living room, surrounded by real estate brochures. Harper, darling. Evelyn's smile was razor sharp. I found the perfect house for you. 5 bedrooms, pool, guest house, room to grow. We don't need 5 bedrooms. I dropped my briefcase, exhausted from a day of meetings. And we definitely don't need a guest house. Don't be silly. Every Mitchell lives in Oakwood Heights. It's tradition. I'm not. I caught myself seeing Ryan's pleading look. We need to discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Ryan said, his voice taking on that familiar tone he used when parroting his mother's words. I already put in an offer. The room went silent. You what? It's a seller's market, Evelyn chimed in. We had to move quickly. Don't worry about the down payment. I'm handling it. My hands started shaking. Ryan, can we talk? Alone. In our bedroom, I tried staying calm. You made an offer on a house without discussing it with me? Mom says. I don't care what your mother says. The words exploded out of me. This is our life, our finances. You can't just. What's the problem? He threw his hands up. You got this big promotion, we're moving up in the world. Isn't this what you wanted? What I wanted, I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. What I wanted was a partner who could make decisions with me, not for me. What I wanted was to build our life together, not live the life your mother designed. You're being dramatic. Mom's just trying to help. Help. I pulled out my laptop, opened our banking app. Look at this. Really look. Even with my raise, that house would eat up everything we make. One emergency and we'd be underwater. Mom said she'd help if. And there it is. I closed the laptop. More strings for your mother to pull. When did you stop being the man I married and become her puppet? His face hardened. At least my mother's still around to help. The words hit like a physical blow. I stepped back, remembering my mother's last days, how she'd fought to give me independence, not control. Your mother's not helping, Ryan. She's buying your obedience. And apparently, it's pretty cheap. I grabbed my keys and jacket, needing to escape before I said something unforgivable. As I passed the living room, Evelyn called out, "Don't be difficult, dear. This is for the best." I paused at the door, thinking of all the times my mother had taught me to stand my ground. "No, Evelyn. This is for your best." And that's not the same thing at all. Walking to my car, I called Zoe. "Remember when you said you had a spare room if I ever needed it?" "Always," she answered without hesitation. "How soon?" I looked back at our apartment, where Ryan stood watching from the window. "I don't know yet. But soon." The call came at 3 in the morning. Richard Mitchell had suffered another heart attack, worse than the first. I woke to find Ryan already dressed, keys in hand. "I have to go," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Dad needs me." I nodded, still half asleep. "Of course. Let me get dressed." "No." His voice was firm. "I need to do this alone." That was 6 months ago. Now I stood in our empty house, the house I'd warned him we couldn't afford, staring at another past due notice. Ryan had quit his job to help care for his father, leaving me to shoulder our mounting debts alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Family dinner tonight." No excuses. Family dinner. Her new Sunday tradition, where she'd spend hours listing everything Ryan had sacrificed for his father, while pointedly ignoring the fact that I was working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat. "I can't make it," I texted back. "Deadline at work." Her response was immediate. "Ryan needs your support. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in my head as I drove to their house that evening. The same words she'd used when I suggested Ryan look for part-time work. When I questioned her decision to hire round-the-clock nurses we couldn't afford, when I dared to mention our growing credit card debt. Ryan met me at the door, looking more like his mother's son than my husband. "You're late." "Traffic." I followed him inside, where Evelyn was holding court in the living room, surrounded by medical bills and insurance forms. "Harper, darling." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We need to discuss the house." "What about it?" "Well," she paused, examining her manicure. "Given the circumstances, it might be best to sell it." The room tilted slightly. "Sell our house." "Ryan needs to be here full-time," she continued. "And since you're so concerned about money." "I'm concerned about surviving," I corrected. "We're drowning in debt because." "Because you lack faith," she interrupted. "Family takes care of family. Ryan understands that." I looked at my husband, but he was studying the carpet. "Ryan, is this what you want?" "It makes sense," he mumbled. "Dad needs me here." "And what about what I need?" The words came out before I could stop them. "I've been killing myself trying to keep us above water while you." "While I what?" His head snapped up. "While I take care of my dying father. I'm sorry we can't all be cold and practical like you." The accusation hit like a slap. "Cold?" "I watched my mother die alone because we couldn't afford proper care. Don't you dare call me cold." "That's different," Evelyn interjected smoothly. "We're not going to abandon Richard the way your father abandoned." "Stop." My voice shook. "Just stop." I walked to the window, watching the expensive landscaping blur through sudden tears. Behind me, I heard Ryan sigh. "Maybe Mom's right," he said quietly. "Maybe we should sell the house. You could get an apartment closer to work, and I could stay here." And there it was. The final thread snapping. "You've already moved out, haven't you?" I turned to face him. "Your clothes, your things, they're all here." His silence was answer enough. "Harper," Evelyn started, but I held up a hand. "No. You win, Evelyn. You finally have him exactly where you want him. Dependent, compliant, just like when he was a child." I pulled my house keys from my purse. "Let them fall onto the coffee table." "But I won't stay to watch." "Don't be dramatic," Ryan protested. "This is temporary." "No, it's not." I met his eyes one last time. "This is who you choose to be. And I choose not to be part of it." Walking out of that house felt like leaving my mother's hospital room all over again. That same hollow ache. That same knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. But this time, the person I was losing had chosen to leave. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from my bank. "Insufficient funds for mortgage payment. Final notice." I started the engine, wondering how I'd ended up here, homeless, nearly bankrupt and completely alone. Again. Richard Mitchell died on a Tuesday, exactly like my father had disappeared. But this time, I wasn't a helpless child watching my world collapse. I was in my office when Ryan's text arrived. Dad's gone. Need you home now. Home. I stared at the word, wondering if he meant our house or his mother's. It didn't matter. I'd lost both. I found them in the kitchen of our house, Ryan and Evelyn huddled over papers spread across the counter I'd picked out 3 years ago. They didn't hear me come in. The house should sell quickly, Evelyn was saying. The market's hot, and with your father's life insurance. What house? My voice made them both jump. Our house. Ryan at least had the decency to look guilty. Harper, I can explain. Explain what? How you're selling our house without telling me. Or how you're counting money your father hasn't even been dead a day. Don't be crude, Evelyn snapped. We're being practical. Something you claim to understand. I moved closer, scanning the papers. Property listings, bank statements, and is that my signature? Ryan paled. I had to, the bank needed. You forged my signature? The room tilted dangerously. On what? Just some paperwork to get the sale moving. Evelyn waved dismissively. Really, Harper, you're making this more dramatic than necessary. Get out. My voice was surprisingly steady. Both of you, get out of my house. Your house. Evelyn laughed. Darling, who do you think has been making the payments these past 6 months? I have. Every single one. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. Want to see the transfers? The overtime hours? The credit card debt I took on while your son played dutiful caretaker. Mom's been helping, Ryan protested. She's been lying. I met Evelyn's eyes. Haven't you? There's no life insurance, is there? The slight twitch in her perfectly composed face told me everything. Richard canceled it years ago. I continued, watching her mask slip. Just like my father did. You've been promising Ryan money that doesn't exist. How dare you? I work in financial analysis, remember? The job you thought was beneath your precious son? I know how to read between the lines. I turned to Ryan. She's broke. Has been for years. All those country club memberships, designer clothes, it's all smoke and mirrors. That's ridiculous, Ryan stammered. Mom. But Evelyn's silence was damning. Get out, I repeated. You have 30 minutes to take what's yours. After that, I'm calling the police about the forgery. You wouldn't, Evelyn hissed. I pulled out my mother's locket, the one I'd worn instead of Evelyn's pearls at my wedding. My mother taught me to stand my ground. Your son might have forgotten who he is, but I haven't forgotten who I am. Ryan, Evelyn turned to her son. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? I watched my husband, the boy who'd offered me coffee on a rainy Tuesday, the man who'd promised to never let me feel alone, crumble under his mother's gaze. We should go, he mumbled. If you walk out that door, I said quietly, don't come back. He paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the Ryan I'd fallen in love with. Then Evelyn touched his arm, and it vanished. I'm sorry, he whispered and followed his mother out. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by their abandoned papers, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. Once again, I was watching someone choose to leave. But this time, I wasn't the scared little girl clutching a teddy bear. This time, I was choosing to. My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. You okay? I looked around the kitchen, at the life Ryan and I had built and the ruins Evelyn had made of it. No, I typed back. But I will be. Then I started gathering evidence for my lawyer. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. After all, I was my mother's daughter, and she taught me how to fight back. 1 year later, I was sorting through the last box from my old house when my phone lit up with a familiar number. Ryan. I watched it ring, remembering the last time I'd seen him in court 6 months ago, when the judge ordered him and Evelyn to repay the money they'd taken from my accounts. You should answer it, Zoe said from her spot on my new couch. After everything, she'd helped me find this small but sunny apartment across town. Get closure or whatever. I picked up on the final ring. Hello. Harper. Ryan's voice was rough, unfamiliar. I need your help. Of course he did. The lawsuit had revealed the extent of Evelyn's deception. Decades of hidden debt, mortgages on mortgages. Credit cards maxed out to maintain their facade of wealth. Last I'd heard, They'd lost everything. I'm sorry, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. But I can't. Please. Moms. She's not handling things well. We're staying in this motel, and… Stop. I closed my eyes, remembering my mother's voice. We bend but never break. You made your choice, Ryan. I know. I know I messed up. But you're the only one who understands about family. No, I interrupted. I understand about strength. About standing on your own 2 feet. That's what real family taught me. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he whispered, I miss you. I miss who you were, I replied. But that person's gone. After hanging up, I reached into the box I'd been sorting, the last one from my old life. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was my mother's jewelry box. I'd avoided opening it since her death, but something compelled me now. Among the modest pieces she'd owned, I found an envelope I'd never seen before. Inside was a letter, dated just weeks before she died. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, you've finally decided to face what's in this box. You always were brave like that, facing things head-on, even when it hurt. I need to tell you something about your father. The police found more than just that receipt from Oregon. They found letters, dozens of them, to another family he'd abandoned before us. It seems running away was his pattern. But that's not your pattern, Harper. You stay. You fight. You build something real from the ruins others leave behind. Whatever life throws at you, remember, your worth isn't measured by who stays or goes. It's measured by how you carry yourself through the storm. All my love, Mom. I traced her handwriting, feeling pieces click into place. My father hadn't just abandoned us. We were part of a pattern, a chain of destruction he'd left in his wake. But Mom had broken that pattern by staying, by showing me a different kind of strength. You okay? Zoe asked, watching me carefully. I looked around my new apartment, smaller than my old house, but paid for with honest work. On the wall hung my financial analyst certification, earned while rebuilding my credit after Ryan's betrayal. The coffee table held brochures for the financial literacy program I'd started, helping other women escape financially abusive relationships. Yeah, I said, tucking Mom's letter into my journal. I really am. My phone buzzed again, Ryan's number. This time, I didn't hesitate. Block contact. Some might call it revenge, letting Ryan and Evelyn face the consequences of their choices. But sitting there, surrounded by the life I'd built from scratch, I realized it wasn't about revenge at all. It was about breaking patterns, the pattern of abandonment my father set, the pattern of control Evelyn wielded, the pattern of dependency Ryan chose. I picked up my mother's locket, the one I'd worn at my wedding, and fastened it around my neck. Inside were 2 pictures now, Mom on one side, and on the other, a photo of me at my program's first graduation ceremony, helping other women find their strength. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better.
I never knew silence could be so loud until I watched my brother's facade crumble, revealing a stranger beneath. The words seemed to echo in the stillness of the room, hanging like a dense fog after Marla's venomous attack on our mother, Elaine. Her lips curled into a smirk as she taunted, "You're just too meek and insignificant to stand up for yourself." I glanced at Everett, my brother, expecting him to defend our gentle mother, but he remained impassive. A hollow shell of the man I once knew. It was as if Marla's venom had seeped into his veins, numbing him to her cruelty. Rage boiled within me, and I found myself stepping forward, fists clenched. "How dare you speak to her that way?" I spat, my voice trembling with fury. Marla's eyes narrowed, and she sneered. "Stay out of this, Cadence. It doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't," I roared, closing the distance between us. "That's my mother you're berating, and I won't stand for it." Everett finally stirred, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Cadence, please, let it go." I shrugged him off, incredulous. "Let it go? Are you hearing yourself? She's treating Mom like garbage, and you're just letting it happen." Marla's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. "Poor, pathetic Elaine. She's lucky I even bother with her." She turned to Everett, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "You see how she is, darling? Always needing to be coddled and fawned over." Everett's gaze dropped, and he nodded meekly, like a puppy being scolded. My heart broke for the brother I once knew, the confident, caring man who would have never tolerated such abuse. Enough, I roared, stepping between them. I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, Marla, but it ends now. You will treat my mother with respect, or you can pack your bags and leave. Marla's eyes with fury, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then, as quickly as the storm had gathered, it dissipated, and she offered a sickly sweet smile. Of course, Cadence, you're absolutely right. I'll be sure to watch my tongue around dear Elaine from now on. She swept past me, brushing my shoulder with hers as she exited the room. Everett followed her like a lost puppy, leaving me alone with my stunned mother. I gathered her into my arms, feeling her frail body tremble with silent sobs. "It's okay, Mom," I murmured, stroking her graying hair. "I won't let her hurt you anymore." As I held her close, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marla's true nature had been revealed, and I knew in my heart that I had to protect my family, no matter the cost. The next few days were like walking on eggshells, each interaction fraught with tension. Marla's saccharine smiles were laced with venom, and Everett remained a hollow shell, refusing to acknowledge the rift that had formed. It wasn't until I stopped by Mom's house unannounced that the full extent of Marla's villainy became apparent. "Mom?" I called out as I stepped inside, taken aback by the unusual disarray. Dishes were piled high in the sink, and the floors were in desperate need of a vacuum. "In here, dear," came her weary voice from the living room. I found her slumped in her favorite armchair, a blanket draped over her lap as she knitted what appeared to be a scarf. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and her movements were slow and labored. "Mom, are you all right?" I asked, crossing the room to her side. She offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. Just a bit tired, that's all." I frowned, taking in her disheveled appearance and the state of the house. "Have you been cooking and cleaning for Everett and Marla again?" Her gaze dropped, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. White-hot anger flared within me. "That's it. I'm putting a stop to this right now." Before she could protest, I was out the door and marching down the street towards Everett's place. I pounded on the door, barely containing my fury. Everett answered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Cadence? What's going on?" "What's going on?" I echoed, jabbing a finger into his chest. "Your wife is running my mother ragged. That's what's going on." His eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder as if afraid Marla might overhear. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, stepping outside and pulling the door shut behind him. "I won't keep my voice down," I shouted, uncaring of who might hear. "Mom is exhausted, Everett. She's cooking, cleaning, and running herself into the ground just to keep Marla happy." He ran a hand over his face, his expression pained. I know. But Marla, she gets upset if things aren't just so." I stared at him, aghast. "Are you hearing yourself? You're letting her walk all over Mom because she throws a tantrum if she doesn't get her way?" Everett's shoulders slumped, and he dropped his gaze. "It's not that simple, Cadence. Marla, she has a way of making things difficult if I don't go along with what she wants." My hands balled into fists at my sides. "So what, you're just going to let her bully and manipulate all of us? Stand up for yourself, Everett. Stand up for our family." His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the brother I once knew. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and he shook his head wearily. "I can't, Cadence. I'm sorry." With those words, he retreated back into the house, leaving me seething on the doorstep. As I stormed away, I knew that this was only the beginning. Marla's twisted grip on my family was tightening, and I had to find a way to break it before it was too late. Frustration gnawed at me in the days that followed. Everett's submission to Marla's twisted demands was like watching a man slowly drown, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. "We need to find out more about her," I told Theo one evening as we prepared dinner. My husband's brow furrowed, but he nodded, sensing the resolve in my voice. That night, after the dishes were done, we began our search. Scouring the internet for any trace of Marla's past, we slowly pieced together a disturbing pattern. "Look at this," Theo murmured, his eyes glued to the screen. "It seems Marla was briefly married to a wealthy businessman a few years back. But the marriage only lasted 6 months before he filed for divorce, citing emotional distress and manipulation." I leaned closer, my heart sinking as I read the details. And here's another. She was engaged to a prominent lawyer, but he broke it off after discovering she'd been lying about her background and finances. Page after page painted a chilling portrait of a woman who thrived on deceit and exploitation. Marla would charm and seduce wealthy men, leeching off their fortunes until they inevitably saw through her facade. Then she would move on to her next target, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake. "She's a black widow," I whispered, feeling ill, "and Everett is her latest victim." Theo squeezed my hand, his expression grim. "We have to show him, Cadence. We have to make him see the truth before it's too late." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. The next day, I invited Everett over under the guise of a casual family dinner. As we sat around the table, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes kept flicking towards the door, as if he expected Marla to burst in at any moment. "Everett," I began, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about Marla." He stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "What about her?" I took a steadying breath and launched into the details we'd uncovered, the string of failed marriages and broken engagements, the pattern of exploitation and deceit. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Everett's face. He shook his head vehemently, his eyes wide with denial. No, you've got it all wrong. Marla would never." But the evidence was irrefutable, and with each new revelation, I could see the cracks in his facade deepening. Finally, when I had laid bare the full extent of Marla's machinations, Everett slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered, his voice thick with anguish. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his arm. "It's not too late, Everett. We can stop her before she destroys our family." He lifted his head, and I saw a flicker of the old Everett, the fierce determination that had once burned so brightly. "You're right," he said, his jaw set. "It's time to end this." As we began to formulate our plan, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The veil had been lifted, and now it was time to take back control from the woman who had wrought so much pain and misery. The confrontation with Marla was like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Everett and I had agreed to approach her together, our united front bolstered by the damning evidence we'd uncovered. I could sense Everett's trepidation as we stood on the doorstep of his home, but there was a newfound determination in his eyes that filled me with hope. Marla answered the door, her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate makeup a stark contrast to the sneer that twisted her features. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo," she drawled, her gaze flickering between us with thinly veiled disdain. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the act, Marla," I spat, pushing past her into the house. "We know what you've been up to." Her brows shot up, but her expression remained infuriatingly smug. "And what, pray tell, have I been up to?" Everett stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. "We know about your past, Marla. The marriages, the engagements, all the men you've manipulated and exploited for their money." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a derisive laugh. "Oh, Everett, you can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations, can you?" She sidled up to him, trailing a manicured hand down his arm. "Your sister is just jealous, darling. She's always resented our happiness." I opened my mouth to protest, but Everett held up a hand, his gaze boring into hers. "Don't bother, Marla," he said, his voice low and steady. "We have proof, documents, records, testimonies from your past victims. It's over." Her eyes narrowed to slits, and for the first time I saw the true depths of her malice laid bare. "You ungrateful wretch," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Everett remained unmoved, his jaw set in a firm line. "You've done nothing but lie and manipulate, Marla. It ends now." With a snarl of rage, she turned on me, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm as she grabbed me. "This is all you're doing, you meddling bitch," she spat, her face contorted in fury. "You're just jealous that your pathetic life will never measure up to mine." Before I could react, Everett had wedged himself between us, his hands gripping Marla's wrists as he pried her away. "That's enough," he growled, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "You're done manipulating this family, Marla. It's over." She struggled against his grip, her eyes wild with desperation. "You'll regret this, Everett," she shrieked. "I'll make sure you lose everything. Your job, your money, your precious family. But her threats rang hollow, her carefully constructed facade lying in shattered pieces at our feet. As Everett hauled her towards the door, she turned her vitriol on me once more. "You think you've won?" she snarled. "This is far from over, Cadence. Mark my words, you'll pay for this." And with that, she was gone, her angry screams echoing down the street as Everett slammed the door behind her. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had transpired hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Everett turned to me, his expression a mixture of shame and gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You saved me from a lifetime of misery." As I held him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph amidst the turmoil. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Marla's threats still lingered, a reminder that her vindictive nature knew no bounds. But in that moment, with my brother by my side once more, I knew we could weather any storm she threw our way. The family she had tried so desperately to fracture was now stronger than ever, and we would face her wrath together, united and unbreakable. In the days following Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. Everett seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Marla's parting threat still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was biding her time, plotting her next move. So when Theo came to me one evening, his expression grim, I steeled myself for the worst. "Cadence," he began, settling beside me on the couch, "I think we have a problem." My heart dropped, and I braced myself for whatever bombshell he was about to unleash. "I just got off the phone with your dad," he continued. "Apparently, Marla has been pressuring Everett to sell the family home." A chill ran down my spine as the implication sank in. The house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of our family's legacy, a place where countless memories had been forged. "She's trying to isolate him," I murmured, my hands clenching into fists. "Strip away everything that ties him to us, so she can worm her way back in." Theo nodded grimly. "Your dad said Everett has been reluctant, but Marla is relentless. She's playing on his guilt, telling him it's the only way to make a fresh start." White-hot anger surged through me, and I shot to my feet, pacing the length of the living room. "That conniving snake," I spat. "After everything she's done, she still has the audacity to try and tear our family apart." Theo caught my arm, pulling me to a halt. "Cadence, we have to do something. If she succeeds in getting Everett to sell the house, it'll be that much harder to break her hold over him." I took a deep breath, tamping down the fury that threatened to consume me. Theo was right. We needed a plan, a way to make Everett see the truth before it was too late. "Call Dad," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "Tell him we're staging an intervention tonight. It's time to put an end to Marla's games once and for all." A few hours later, we were gathered in the living room of the family home. Mom, Dad, Everett, Theo, and myself. The tension was thick, Everett's eyes darting toward the exits as if he expected Marla to burst through the door at any moment. "What's this all about?" he demanded, his gaze finally landing on me. I took a steadying breath, squaring my shoulders. "It's about Marla," I said, holding his gaze, "and her latest attempt to manipulate you into selling this house." His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to protest, but I forged ahead. "Don't try to deny it, Everett. We know she's been pressuring you, playing on your guilt and insecurities. But can't you see? This is just another ploy to isolate you from your family, to make you dependent on her again." Everett's jaw clenched, and he shook his head vehemently. "You're wrong, Cadence. Marla just wants what's best for us, a fresh start away from all the drama and conflict." I scoffed, feeling the frustration mount. "Wake up, Everett. She's the one causing all the drama and conflict. She's a toxic parasite, and she'll never stop until she's drained every last ounce of life from this family." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Mom rise from her chair, her face etched with a determination I'd never seen before. "Your sister is right, Everett," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "That woman's caused nothing but pain and misery since the day she wormed her way into our lives." She crossed the room, laying a hand on his arm. "This house is our home, our legacy. Please don't let her take that away from us." Everett's gaze flickered between us, his expression a whirlwind of emotions. I could see the battle raging within him, the struggle between Marla's poisonous influence and the love for his family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "You're right," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. "I've been so blind, so desperate to make things work with Marla that I've nearly lost everything that truly matters." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I won't let her win, not this time. The house stays, and Marla—" He swallowed hard. "Marla is out of our lives for good." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, love and loyalty had prevailed over Marla's twisted machinations. As we gathered around Everett, enveloping him in an embrace, I knew that our family was finally on the path to healing. The shadows that had lingered for so long were fading, and a new dawn was on the horizon. One where Marla's poisonous influence could no longer reach us. The day of Mom's birthday celebration dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As I helped her prepare for the party, arranging platters of her famous lemon bars and hanging streamers, I couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that buzzed through my veins. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, the moment when we would finally expose Marla's true nature to the world and break her hold over Everett once and for all. "You seem tense, dear," Mom murmured, laying a gentle hand on my arm. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just want to make sure your party is perfect." She returned my smile, her eyes shining with affection. "As long as my family is here, it will be." As the guests began to arrive, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a temporary reprieve from the turmoil that had plagued us for far too long. Everett arrived with a hesitant smile, his gaze constantly flicking towards the door as if expecting Marla to make an appearance. "It's going to be all right," I murmured, pulling him aside. "We're going to put an end to her lies once and for all." He nodded, his jaw set with determination, and rejoined the party. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel the tension mounting, the calm before the storm. Finally, when the last of the guests had arrived, I caught Theo's eye and gave him a subtle nod. It was time. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass, calling for silence. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." The room gradually fell quiet, all eyes turning towards me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "First and foremost," I began, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my incredible mother on her birthday." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd, and Mom ducked her head shyly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "However," I continued, my voice growing steely, "there is another reason we've gathered you all here today." I locked eyes with Everett, giving him a subtle nod of encouragement before turning my attention back to the assembled guests. For far too long, a dark shadow has loomed over this family, a poisonous presence that has sought to divide and manipulate us for her own selfish gain. My gaze swept over the crowd, daring anyone to look away. I'm speaking, of course, about Marla. A hush fell over the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Everett tense, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the back of a chair. "Marla has woven a tangled web of lies and deceit," I pressed on, my voice ringing with conviction. "She has exploited and preyed upon my brother, leeching off his fortune and manipulating him into cutting ties with those who truly care about him." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, but I forged ahead, laying bare the evidence we had gathered, the trail of broken engagements and failed marriages, the testimonies from her past victims. As I spoke, I could see the shock and revulsion etched on the faces of our guests, the realization sinking in that they had been duped by Marla's carefully constructed facade. Finally, when every last sordid detail had been exposed, I turned my gaze to Everett, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and relief. "It's over, Everett," I said softly. "You're free of her poison." For a long moment he remained motionless, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then, slowly, he straightened his shoulders, his features hardening with a newfound resolve. "You're right, Cadence," he said, his voice ringing out across the hushed room. "It's over." Turning on his heel, he strode towards the front door, throwing it open with a resounding bang, And there, frozen on the doorstep with a look of abject horror painted across her features, stood Marla. "You," she sputtered, her perfectly manicured mask cracking as she took in the scene before her. "You can't do this to me." But her protests fell on deaf ears as Everett advanced, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "Get out," he growled, his words laced with a finality that brooked no argument. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." For a beat, Marla seemed poised to argue, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. But as her gaze swept over the sea of accusatory stares, she must have realized the futility of her situation. With a cry of outrage, she whirled on her heel and stormed off into the night, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement as she disappeared from sight. A deafening silence hung in her wake, punctuated only by the occasional murmur or cough. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. As I looked around at the faces of my family and friends, I saw nothing but pride and support reflected back at me. We had faced down the darkness that had threatened to consume us, and emerged victorious, battered perhaps, but unbroken. And as Everett turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, I knew that our journey towards healing had truly begun. In the days that followed Marla's explosive banishment from our lives, a palpable shift seemed to ripple through our family. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, a toxic cloud of negativity and manipulation that had hung over us for far too long. Everett, in particular, seemed to undergo a profound transformation. Gone was the haunted, hollow-eyed man who had been so thoroughly cowed by Marla's venom. In his place stood a man reborn, his shoulders squared and his gaze clear and focused. "It's like waking from a nightmare," he confided in me one evening as we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and basking in the warm evening air. All this time I was living in a fog, blind to the truth and trapped by her lies. I reached over, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're free of her now, Everett. We all are." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I just wish I had seen it sooner, before she had the chance to inflict so much pain and damage." A familiar pang of guilt twisted in my gut, but I pushed it aside. Dwelling on regrets would only hold us back from truly healing. "The important thing is that we made it through," I said firmly, "and now we can focus on rebuilding and moving forward as a family." Everett smiled, the weight of Marla's lingering specter seeming to lift from his shoulders. "You're right. It's a new beginning for all of us." As the days stretched into weeks, the true extent of Marla's deception began to unravel. It seemed that her pattern of exploitation and manipulation had cast a wide net, ensnaring countless victims over the years. One by one they emerged from the shadows, emboldened by the news of her downfall and eager to share their stories. Tales of emotional abuse, financial ruin, and shattered lives poured forth, painting a chilling portrait of a woman utterly devoid of conscience or remorse. The fallout was swift and merciless. Marla's carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down around her, leaving her social standing in tatters, and her once abundant finances drained to the dregs. Through it all, Everett remained a pillar of strength, weathering the storm with a newfound resilience that inspired us all. Gone was the guilt and shame that had once weighed him down. In its place was a steely determination to make amends and move forward. "I can't change the past," he said during one of our many heart-to-heart conversations, "but I can damn well make sure the future is better for all of us." And true to his word, he did. With an unwavering focus, he set about rebuilding the relationships that Marla had so callously fractured, starting with our parents. It was a long and often painful process, fraught with difficult conversations and emotional revelations. But through it all, our family remained united, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our shared determination to triumph over Marla's poisonous legacy. As for my role, I took it upon myself to be the mediator, the calm voice of reason that helped guide our family through the turbulent waters of healing. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when tempers flared and progress seemed elusive. But I persevered, drawing strength from the knowledge that we were finally on the right path, a path that led away from the shadows and towards the light of a brighter future. And as the weeks turned into months, that future began to take shape before our very eyes. The rifts that had once seemed insurmountable slowly knitted themselves together, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the unbreakable bonds that tied us as a family. It was during one of our Sunday dinners, the table laden with Mom's famous pot roast, and the air filled with laughter and conversation, that I truly realized how far we had come. Gazing around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and loyalty to one another stronger than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, fortified by the knowledge that the darkness that had once threatened to consume us had finally been banished for good. In the aftermath of Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. It was as if we had all been holding our collective breath, bracing for the next inevitable blow from her twisted machinations. But as the days stretched into weeks and her poisonous presence faded into a distant memory, we slowly began to exhale. Of course, the road to healing was far from smooth. Marla's betrayal had left deep scars, both emotional and financial. Everett, in particular, struggled with the fallout of her deceit, his once thriving business and personal accounts drained to the dregs by her relentless exploitation. "I feel like such a fool," he confided in me one evening, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "How could I have been so blind, so willing to hand over everything I've worked for to that parasite?" I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, offering what comfort I could. "You were manipulated, Everett. She preyed on your trust and twisted your devotion into a weapon against you. But that's over now." He nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right. It's time to start rebuilding, to take back what she stole from me, from all of us." And rebuild we did, each of us shouldering a share of the burden. Mom and Dad opened their home to Everett, offering him a sanctuary as he sorted through the tangled mess of his finances. Theo, ever the level-headed voice of reason, helped devise a plan to get Everett's business back on track, utilizing his keen business acumen to plug the leaks and stem the tide of financial ruin. As for me, I became the glue that held our fractured family together. I organized weekly dinners, ensuring we all had a regular opportunity to come together and reconnect. I mediated the difficult conversations, lending an understanding ear and offering gentle guidance when tempers flared. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the strain of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But whenever I felt myself wavering, I would think back to those dark days when Marla's poisonous grip had nearly torn us apart, and I would find the strength to persevere. Slowly but surely the cracks began to mend, and our family emerged from the rubble stronger than ever before. Everett's business flourished under Theo's guidance, and he was able to regain his financial footing, a newfound humility and appreciation for the value of hard work shining through. Mom and Dad, too, seemed rejuvenated by the renewed sense of unity that bound us together. Gone were the hollow-eyed resignation and strained silences that had plagued them during Marla's reign of terror. In their place was a warmth and vibrancy that I hadn't seen in years, a reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained our family through countless storms. And as for me, well, I found myself reinvigorated by the knowledge that my unwavering determination had played a pivotal role in our family's salvation. No longer was I content to be a mere bystander in life, watching from the sidelines as others shaped their destinies. I had tasted the power of taking action, of standing up for what was right, and I knew that I could never go back to the way things were before. It was this newfound sense of purpose that drove me to take on a new challenge: the restoration of our family home. The once proud manor had fallen into disrepair during Marla's toxic tenure, its rooms and halls battered by neglect and the weight of her corrosive presence. But now, with her shadow banished and our family united, I saw an opportunity to breathe new life into the heart of our legacy. Enlisting the help of Everett and Theo, we set about the task of restoring the grand old house to its former glory, stripping away the layers of grime and decay to reveal the beauty that had been hidden beneath. It was backbreaking work, filled with long hours and more than a few heated arguments. But through it all, we persevered, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and the knowledge that every nail hammered, every wall sanded, was a tangible symbol of our family's resilience and rebirth. And when the final coat of paint had dried and the last piece of furniture had been carefully arranged, we stood back and marveled at our handiwork. The house fairly glowed, its polished floors and gleaming woodwork a testament to the power of perseverance and love. It was on a warm summer evening, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, that we gathered on the front porch to celebrate our victory. Mom and Dad, hand in hand, their faces aglow with pride. Everett and Theo, shoulders brushing as they shared a conspiratorial grin. And me, standing in the midst of it all, my heart swelling with a sense of triumph and unbridled joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To family, to resilience, and to the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the darkest of storms. For in that moment, bathed in the warmth of the fading light, and surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, I knew that we had truly emerged from the shadows, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and more united than ever before. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a surge of confidence and determination. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. A family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the knowledge that our love and loyalty to one another was unshakable. Marla's poisonous legacy had been purged, and in its place a new chapter was beginning. One written in the bonds of unbreakable family, resilience, and hope for a brighter tomorrow.